left for us. Soon after, saw the captain and officers whispering for some time in private conference. When over, their boat was manned under the command of Bolidar, and went to one of those islands or keys before mentioned. On their return, another conference took place. Whether it was a jury upon our lives we could not tell. I did not think conscience could be entirely extinguished in the human breast, or that men could become fiends. In the afternoon, while we knew not the doom which had been fixed for us, the captain was engaged with several of his men in gambling, in hopes to get back some of the $500, they said, he lost but a few nights before, which had made him unusually fractious. A little before sunset he ordered all the prisoners into the large boat, with a supply of provisions and water, and to be put on shore. While we were getting into her, one of my fellow prisoners, a Spaniard, attempted with tears in his eyes to speak to the captain, but was refused with the answer, "I'll have nothing to say to any prisoner. Go into the boat." In the meantime Nickola said to me, "My friend, I will give you your book," being Mr. Coleman's sermons. "It is the only thing of yours that is in my possession. I dare not attempt anything more." But the captain forbid his giving it to me, and I stepped into the boat. At that moment Nickola said in a low voice, "Never mind, I may see you again before I die." The small boat was well armed and manned, and both set off together for the island, where they had agreed to leave us to perish. The scene to us was a funeral scene. There were no arms in the prisoners' boat, and of course all attempts to relieve ourselves would have been throwing our lives away, as Bolidar was near us, well armed. We were rowed about 2 miles northeasterly from the pirates, to a small low island, lonely and desolate. We arrived about sunset, and for the support of us 11 prisoners, they only left a 10-gallon keg of water, and perhaps a few quarts, in another small vessel, which was very poor; part of a barrel of flour, a small keg of lard, 1 ham and some salt fish, a small kettle and an old broken pot, an old sail for a covering, and a small mattress and blanket, which was thrown out as the boats hastened away. One of the prisoners happened to have a little coffee in his pocket, and these comprehended all our means of sustaining life, and for what length of time we knew not. We now felt the need of water, and our supply was comparatively nothing. A man may live nearly twice as long without food, as without water. Look at us now, my friends, left benighted on a little spot of sand in the midst of the ocean, far from the usual track of vessels, and every appearance of a violent thunder tempest, and a boisterous night. Judge of my feelings, and the circumstances which our band of sufferers now witnessed. Perhaps you can, and have pitied us. I assure you, we were very wretched, and to paint the scene, is not within my power. When the boats were moving from the shore, on recovering myself a little, I asked Bolidar, if he was going to leave us so? He answered, "No, only 2 days. We go for water and wood, then come back take you." I requested him to give us bread and other stores, for they had plenty in the boat, and at least 100 barrels of flour in the Mexican. "No, no, suppose tomorrow morning me come, me give you bread," and hurried off to the vessel. This was the last time I saw him. We then turned our attention upon finding a spot most convenient for our comfort, and soon discovered a little roof supported by stakes driven into the sand. It was thatched with leaves of the cocoa nut tree, considerable part of which was torn or blown off. After spreading the old sail over this roof, we placed our little stock of provisions under it. Soon after came on a heavy shower of rain, which penetrated the canvas, and made it nearly as uncomfortable inside as it would have been out. We were not prepared to catch water, having nothing to put it in. Our next object was to get fire, and after gathering some of the driest fuel to be found, and having a small piece of cotton wick yarn, with flint and steel we kindled a fire, which was never afterwards suffered to be extinguished. The night was very dark, but we found a piece of old rope, which when well lighted served for a candle. On examining the ground under the roof, we found perhaps thousands of creeping insects, scorpions, lizards, crickets, &c. After scraping them out as well as we could, the most of us having nothing but the damp earth for a bed, laid ourselves down in hopes of some rest; but it being so wet, gave many of us severe colds, and one of the Spaniards was quite sick for several days. Sunday, 20th. As soon as daylight came on, we proceeded to take a view of our little island, and found it to measure only 1 acre, of coarse white sand, about 2 feet and in some spots perhaps 3 feet above the surface of the ocean. On the highest part were growing some bushes and small mangroves, the dry part of which was our fuel, and the wild castor oil beans. We were greatly disappointed in not finding the latter suitable food. Likewise some of the prickly pear bushes, which gave us only a few pears about the size of our small button pear. The outside has thorns, which if applied to the fingers or lips, will remain there, and cause a severe smarting similar to the nettle. The inside a spongy substance, full of juice and seeds, which are red and a little tartish. Had they been there in abundance, we should not have suffered so much for water; but alas! even this substitute was not for us. On the northerly side of the island was a hollow, where the tide penetrated the sand, leaving stagnant water. We presumed, in hurricanes the island was nearly overflowed. According to the best calculations I could make, we were about 35 miles from any part of Cuba, 100 from Trinidad, and 40 from the usual track of American vessels, or others which might pass that way. No vessel of any considerable size can safely pass among these keys, or Queen's Gardens as the Spaniards call them, being a large number extending from Cape Cruz to Trinidad, 150 miles distance, and many more than the charts have laid down, most of them very low and some covered at high water, which makes it very dangerous for navigators without a skilful pilot. After taking this view of our condition, which was very gloomy, we began to suspect we were left on this desolate island by those merciless plunderers to perish. Of this I am now fully convinced. Still we looked anxiously for the pirates' boat to come according to the promise, with more water and provisions, but looked in vain. We saw them soon get under way with all sail set and run directly from us until out of our sight, and we never saw them again. One may partially imagine our feelings, but they cannot be put into words. Before they were entirely out of sight of us, we raised the white blanket upon a pole, waving it in the air, in hopes that at 2 miles distance they would see it and be moved to pity. But pity in such monsters was not to be found. It was not their interest to save us from the lingering death, which we now saw before us. We tried to compose ourselves, trusting to God, who had witnessed our sufferings, would yet make use of some one, as the instrument of his mercy towards us. Our next care now was to try for water. We dug several holes in the sand and found it, but quite too salt for use. The tide penetrates probably through the island. We now came on short allowances for water. Having no means of securing what we had by lock and key, some one in the night would slyly drink, and it was soon gone. The next was to bake some bread, which we did by mixing flour with salt water and frying it in lard, allowing ourselves 8 quite small pancakes to begin with. The ham was reserved for some more important occasion, and the salt fish was lost for want of fresh water. The remainder of this day was passed in the most serious conversation and reflection. At night I read prayers from the prayer book, before mentioned, which I most carefully concealed while last on board the pirates. This plan was pursued morning and evening during our stay there, then retired for rest and sleep, but realized little of either. End of chapter 23, part 1.